I saw the couple in a dark corner imagining a quiet evening alone. But it wasn't like that at all. They followed us, took seats from where they could watch us, and didn't take their eyes off us from the moment we sat down. They might as well have been wearing badges that said private investigators on duty. Who were they following? Me and my secretary, Katie. Katie was actually more of a personal assistant than a secretary, and she always accompanied me on business trips. My wife's boyfriend decided that Katie was more than just an assistant to her and tried to find out the truth. He wanted information he could pass on to Jean, so she would divorce me and get a large settlement. Apparently, she hadn't explained to him why she couldn't do that. That day, Katie and I flew into Dallas-Fort Worth Airport to attend a meeting with Milgard Industries and planned to stay overnight. I was sure I recognized the blonde woman from the couple who had been watching us from the baggage claim area at the airport. Jean's boyfriend was spending a lot of money to follow us when we were out of town, but he didn't realize he was wasting his money. When Katie and I finished dinner, I called the waiter and asked for the check. Katie got up and went to her room, and I went to the bar. I had a few drinks and gave my observers information for their report. I asked a couple of ladies to dance and even joined one of them at our table for a drink. We chatted for a while, and it turned out that she was also on a business trip and was just killing time at the bar because there was nothing interesting on TV. She made it clear that she wasn't here for sex, which was fine with me because that wasn't what I was here for either. I danced with her 2 more times and then went to my room. There, I took a small black box out of my suitcase, turned it on, and walked around the room with it. It was a device I got from a friend who owned a security company. It picked up electrical and wireless signals, a bug detector, so to speak. Everything in my room was clean, so I went to the door of the next room and knocked 3 times. 30 seconds later, the door opened and Katie appeared in high heels with a smile on her face. I didn't hire a private investigator. Katie was registered in room 212 and I was in room 516. The room next door, 518, was booked under the name Frank Bowers, and there was no Mr. Bowers. The fact that I lingered in the hotel lobby prevented the private investigators from following me and gave Katie the opportunity to go up to her room, wait 15 minutes, and then go up to room 518. If anyone had been following her, they would have seen her go into room 1, and we were counting on the fact that once she was in the room, they wouldn't waste any time on her since I was still with the team. Katie also had one of Alan's little black boxes, and she checked her room in room 518 before I went up to mine. Why did we have to go through all these obstacles? Simple. I knew for a fact that the private investigators weren't hired by my wife, and although I suspected that Jean's boyfriend had hired them, I wasn't sure. It could have been industrial espionage by one of my competitors. In any case, I decided it was better to be safe than sorry. Why was I so sure that my wife wasn't behind the private investigators? I think it was because of the following. It all started like many other stories by chance. I finished breakfast, kissed Jean goodbye, and left for work. Jean called me and said, "Don't forget that we're having dinner with Pat and Andy tonight, so try to get home early." I arranged with Mom to pick up the kids for the night. When I pulled into the garage, I pressed the button to open the gate, and it opened. I got in the car, drove out of the garage, and drove down the driveway. When I got to the street, I pressed the button on the remote to close the gate, but it didn't close. I pressed the button several more times, but the gate still wouldn't close, so I pulled over to the side of the road, got out of the car, and went back into the house. I had 9-volt batteries in the basement, and I knew from experience that if the remote didn't work, it was usually because the batteries were dead. I walked through the garage to the front door, and as I opened it, I heard Jean laughing and saying, "The big fool is gone. Do you have time to come in for a minute before you go to work? Are we still having dinner tonight?" "Sure. I like sitting with you, Frank and Pat, knowing we just treated them to another dinner." "Okay, honey. See you in 15 minutes. And I heard the click as the phone was put down. My first impulse was to rush over to Jean and make a scene about what I had just heard. But a little voice in my head said, "Wait, Hoss, better find out all you can before you get involved." I quietly closed the door, got in my car, and drove to work. I didn't need to park at the end of the block to see who was coming in 15 minutes. From what I heard, it was Andy. Andy was the husband of Jean's best friend, Pat. All the way to work, I thought about the situation while the big jerk was working out his plan. First, I needed to gather more information, and I knew how to do that. As soon as I got to the office, I called Alan Audette from Audette Security Services. Alan and I had grown up together, and he was my closest friend. My father had given Alan money to start the company when he got out of the army. Alan had served in the ASA, Army Security Agency, and learned many things that he thought would be useful in civilian life. He told me about his ideas, and I convinced his father to help him. When I got hold of Alan, I told him what I had just found out and what I wanted to do, and he said, "No problem. Get her out of the house and don't let her leave for about 2 hours. We're having dinner with Pat and Andy tonight. We'll probably go to Duke's Steakhouse, and we won't be home for at least 3 hours. I'll stop by and get the key. And Frank? Sorry, man. I always thought you and Jean were great together." "I thought so too, Alan. I thought so too. My problem is going to be not climbing over the table after Andy and grabbing him by the throat. There'll be time for that, buddy. Just keep your cool. Win yourself an Oscar tonight." "Yeah," I thought as I hung up. Much easier said than done. I grabbed a pen and notepad and jotted down a plan of action. First, I needed more information, and I had already taken care of that by calling Alan. Second, I needed to protect my assets, including my credit history. At some point, I would have to do something about the credit cards that Jean and I had. I would need to open another safe deposit box in my name and transfer some things, such as certificates of deposit, from the safe deposit box that both Jean and I had access to. I wouldn't have touched the checking account, but I would have closed the savings account and transferred the money there. In the end, we divided most of our personal property equally, but my most valuable assets remained untouched. When we got married, Jean had to sign a strict prenuptial agreement that prevented her from getting a share in the family business. My great-grandfather founded the company and passed it on to my grandfather, who in turn passed it on to my father. The company was privately held and was ultimately supposed to pass to me. My great-grandfather, grandfather, and father wanted the company to always remain in the family, so Jean had to sign the prenuptial agreement. The third condition consisted of one word: revenge. I didn't write anything down in that section. I had time to think about it, but it would have been too cruel a decision. I promised myself that it would be that way. It really would have been cruel. I was putting away my list when Katie came in and reminded me that I had a lunch meeting with John Crossfire from Crossfire Manufacturing. "Do you want me to go with you?" "I think so. Take good notes. Crossfire could be a good acquisition for us." I had to admit that I liked women. I was completely devoted to Jean, but I enjoyed looking at beautiful women, which is why I hired so many of them. When Katie came in for her interview, I hired her the moment she walked through the door. I didn't care if she could type or even write. She was the embodiment of my dream, and I wanted her to work in my office where I could look at her all day. Fortunately, Katie could do everything, and she quickly became my right-hand woman. After 2 years of working with me, I had no doubt that Katie could take my place and assume my responsibilities if the need arose. I smiled to myself, thinking that she could easily take Jean's place and take over her duties. Katie was the only girl who could tempt me to cheat on Jean, but fortunately I kept my cool. At least for now. I quickly dismissed the thought. Just because Jean was a slut didn't mean I had to be one too. I finished my work and left the office half an hour early, as Jean had asked. When I got home, I was greeted with a kiss, and Jean was already dressed and ready to go out. I thought about my speech at dinner that evening and remembered Jean's performance. She had played the role of a loving wife perfectly. I had no idea that she considered me a big dummy, and it didn't show in the bedroom at all. Our love life was wonderful. I didn't notice that she had stopped loving or caressing me, and that led me to another thought. How many times had I come to Jean instead of Andy? How many times had she given me carefree moments? Could I have done that to her, knowing what I know now? I would have had to if I didn't want her to start suspecting that I knew something. I needed everything to look normal until I got the information I needed. Dinner was like dozens of others when the four of us got together, only this time the big fool knew what Andy and Jean were up to. That changed things a little. Now I was looking for the subtle signs I knew had to be there. As usual, Jean sat next to me in the cab, with Pat and Andy on the other side, Andy across from Jean. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Jean's leg twitch slightly, and at the same time a smirk flashed across Andy's face. I wondered if Jean was playing with Andy's foot or maybe she was higher up in his groin. If I hadn't overheard the phone conversation, I would never have noticed. After dinner, we went to the Black Hole to drink and dance. Andy danced with Jean, and they were reserved, probably because Pat and I were there. I danced with Pat, and as I held her, I wondered if she had any idea that Andy was cheating on her. If she did, she probably didn't even think about the fact that it was her best friend. Jean and Pat had been best friends since second grade, and I wondered how Jean could betray Pat like that. It would be interesting to see how Pat reacted when she found out about Jean and Andy, and she did. I'll keep an eye on that. When I got to the office this morning, Katie called and said Alan had called and asked me to call him as soon as I got there. "We got the award last night," Alan said when I picked up the phone. There was a cell phone charging on the kitchen table, and since I know you never leave yours behind, I figured it was Jean's phone. I installed a bug in it, so now her cell phone, your home phones, and her car are all under surveillance. I need to show you where the hidden camera switch is in the bedroom so you can be there alone. Are they checked? Of course I checked, you slimy alpha male. Did you get them? Oh yeah. They're wireless, activated by movement and sound. They send a signal to a remote control which in turn sends it to the devices in my shop. If anything happens in your house, you'll be in control. Thanks, Alan. No problem, buddy. Glad to help. If nothing catastrophic happens, let's agree to have lunch together every Friday so you can keep me in the loop. Sure. Talk to you later. Bye. The rest of the week flew by, and I diligently played the role of the loving husband. On Friday, I met Alan for lunch. Nothing earth-shattering, buddy, he said, handing me an envelope containing the evidence he had gathered so far. Right now, she's having lunch in your bedroom with that jerk. From what we've gathered, it looks like this has been going on for several years. I don't know exactly how long, but it seems like it's been going on for a while. Maybe something on the discs will help you find out how long it's been going on. On the other hand, they didn't fake your death, although they did plan to divorce each other. There aren't any specific details yet, but it looks like they're waiting for something financial to happen. They won't get anything from me. I have an ironclad prenuptial agreement that covers everything important. I don't know, buddy. Maybe we'll find out in the next couple of weeks. They're sure they've thought everything through and that neither you nor his wife know anything, even though you made a scene at the alpha male's party. When she talked to him the next day, she told him what happened and said she was afraid you'd suspect something. He convinced her that it was all because you're an insecure husband who wants to prove his strength. Have you decided what you're going to do? Not yet. I need a lot more information before I can make a decision. Keep gathering information, but can you organize it so I can get it before Friday's dinner? No problem. I can give you the recordings from the cameras in the house, but not the information from the listening devices in the phone and car. Do you need it at home or at the office? The office. I don't want to risk her finding anything that might reveal her plans. Alan handed me a small box. These are bugs to plant in her purse. If she's like most women, she has one or two favorites that she always uses. I returned to the office, and since I had no plans, went down to the conference room, grabbed a cart with audio and video equipment, and dragged it into my office. The cart had a large TV and everything I needed to watch cassettes, CDs, and DVDs. I told Kathy not to bother me unless something urgent came up, and settled in to watch the discs Alan had given me. There was nothing interesting in the phone calls, except for Jean's concerns about my behavior as an alpha male. It mostly boiled down to making appointments and exchanging phrases like, "I miss you," and "I can't wait to see you again." The visual material was uninteresting. The only thing I expected to see but didn't was trash. In a conversation I overheard, I heard myself being called a big fool. From the recordings for that week, I learned nothing about why or when they started. The weekend was uneventful. Jean, the kids, and I slept in a tent at the lake. On Monday, I was too busy to check the home camera footage, and on Tuesday, I went on a short trip that prevented me from checking on Jean. On Wednesday, I checked the camera from time to time but didn't notice anything. Andy worked in real estate and could leave the office and visit Jean whenever he wanted, but I couldn't sit at the computer all day. On Thursday, I managed to catch them as they were finishing up and getting dressed, but I had to wait until Friday when we had lunch with Alan to find out what they had been talking about. Jean wanted to do it on Thursday evening, and I came to the conclusion that she liked giving me Andy's leftovers. When I had dinner with Alan, he told me that the week had been pretty boring. They had met on Tuesday, as I had expected, and of course the night before. How long do you want to keep this up? You've had enough time to find out everything. I guess so, but I'm hoping to get some information that will give me an idea of when and why they started dating. And I'm curious about the financial issues they're facing before the divorce. Let's wait another couple of weeks, and if nothing comes up by then, I'll close the case. Jean wanted to do it that evening, and I began to notice a pattern. She wanted to do it on evenings when she had spent the day with Andy, On Saturday, she told me she was going shopping and asked me to watch the kids. I didn't mind, of course, and we had a fun day together. Jean came home around 7 with a bunch of bags and packages, so it looked like she had been shopping. But she wanted to make love that night, which told me she hadn't spent all her time shopping. Since I found out about her and Andy, I hadn't made any attempts to flirt with Jean. I just went along with her lead. I wondered if she would notice sooner or later, and if she did, would it make her think twice? I decided that now I had to be the one to make the first move, and on Sunday evening, I made my move and got a response. "Not tonight, honey. I've had a hard day and I just want to lie in the bath." It was the first time she had ever refused me. That night, I did what I had been putting off because, to be honest, I wasn't sure I really wanted to know. After Jean and the kids were asleep, I got out of bed and went to the kids' rooms. I carefully opened their mouths and took swabs from the inside of their cheeks. The next day, I took them to the lab for DNA testing and said I would pay extra for expedited results. That evening, Jean wanted to make love, and I assumed she had been with Andy earlier. This was confirmed the next morning when Alan called me. "We have something. They met yesterday, and I think you should see it before Friday. I'll send it to you." At 10:15, I had the disc in my hands and headed to the conference room to use the audio-visual equipment. As usual, there was nothing interesting, but the conversation that took place while everyone was getting dressed was informative. "How soon can we pull the plug?" Jean asked. "Nothing's changed since you last asked. Pat won't get any money from his trust fund until he's 35, and that's 2 years from now. Any news on your end? Is Frank's father going to hand over the company to Frank?" "It doesn't look like it. The old fart is as healthy as a horse." "Well, since we can't get anything out of Frank, we'll just have to wait until Pat turns 35. Why don't we just say screw it and do it? I'll get the kids after the divorce, and I'm sure the court will give me the house until they're 18. I'll get a good amount of alimony and half of our property, which is a lot. I'm not going to pass up the chance to get half of Pat's $5 million. There are only 2 years left, 19 months actually, and we've already waited 6 years, so why wait 2 more? We've been lucky, and I'm afraid our luck won't last forever. I want to end this on my terms, not Frank's. So cross your fingers and hope that Frank's father retires in the next couple of months. You won't get a share in the company under the prenuptial agreement, but once Frank gains control of it, its net worth will increase, and your half of the assets could double. I still think we should do it now. You worry too much, my love. Everything will be fine." I turned off the phone and heard, "Poor thing." I turned around and saw Katie. "Sorry, boss, I didn't mean to disturb you, but the door was open and I wanted to remind you about your meeting with Gilmer at Apex Products this afternoon. How long have you been working there?" "Practically since the beginning. You were so absorbed in your work that you probably didn't hear me come in. When I saw you looking at me, I should have left quietly, but I couldn't take my eyes off you." "How long have you two known each other?" "Longer than I'd like. This will stay between us, right? You know me, boss. You know I'll support you. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet. I need more information before I can make a decision." "I'll do anything. Just tell me what to do, okay?" "Thanks, Katie." When I took out the disc, a plan began to form in my head. It had flaws, but if I could work around them, it would work. A week passed, and on Thursday I went to the lab to find out if the DNA test results were ready, and they were. According to the tests, the children were mine. This changed the plan I had been working on, and this information gave me the push I needed to take action. If successful, I was going to attack through the back door. I would sink them, and they wouldn't even know I did it. The hardest part was getting Pat to agree not to tell Andy and Jean. The only way to do that was to catch Pat alone. Fortunately, I had a way. Pat was a middle manager at a company we did business with, and I visited them from time to time. I usually stopped by Pat's office and asked her out to lunch. I didn't like doing this to her, but she had to know what a jerk she was married to and about his plan to cheat on her. I arrived at Milford Manufacturing at 11:15, talked to Marv, the purchasing agent, and then stopped by Pat's office. "Time for lunch? With you? Anytime." We got into my car and drove off. When she saw that I was driving away from the restaurants, she asked where we were going, and I said it was a surprise. She looked at me quizzically as we pulled up to my parking spot at work, and I told her it would be free in a few minutes. I led her into the conference room, telling Katie not to disturb us. I closed the door and said, "I really hate to do this to you, and you may never want to talk to me again, but it has to be done." Why wouldn't I want to talk to you? In the old days, messengers who brought bad news were killed. Bad news? The worst, absolutely terrible news. I inserted the disc into the audio-visual device and pressed play. The screen lit up, and Pat saw Andy entertaining her best friend. She stood there stunned, then said, "This is some kind of joke, right?" I shook my head. No. I took out the disc, inserted another one, and said, "I've had this crap for 3 weeks and I probably wouldn't have told you about it until I decided what to do, but yesterday it happened. And I felt like you should know so you can decide for yourself what to do." I took out the disc that was playing and inserted the one Alan had given me. She looked at it and said, "That pathetic son of a bitch, that rotten two-faced bastard, that goddamn bastard, and that bitch, I would have died for her." And she burst into tears. I hugged her and tried to comfort her, even though I knew it was impossible. I had just destroyed her world, and I knew exactly how she felt. "It's terrible, honey, I know. But the question now is, what are we going to do? What are you going to do?" I thought I'd do nothing and leave everything as it is until the kids turn 18. If I divorce that cheating bitch, she'll take the kids and I'll be a part-time father, while your asshole husband lives with them and has a huge influence on their upbringing. When I heard their plan for you, I had to rethink everything. I had to tell you about it while you still have time to do something about it. What do you mean? You have almost 2 years before you gain trust. I don't know what you have in mind. Maybe you love that worthless bastard and want to fight for him for all I know. But the fact that I showed you this disc gives you enough time to divorce him before you get your money. So, like I said, you have time to do something about it. If I divorce him, Jean will get involved, and you won't be able to pretend you don't know what's going on anymore. That means you'll get divorced and lose the kids. Maybe, maybe not. What do you mean? If you don't use the material I've already gathered, Jean won't find out what I know. We can hire a private investigator to follow Andy and use what he finds out. I know that Jean leaves the house on weekends to go shopping and that she meets with Andy. The next time the detective follows them, we can use his information to get to Andy. You can look Jean in the eye and tell her you won't tell me because you don't want to hurt me or the kids. That way I can keep my information until I'm ready to burn her. Of course, it might not work. She might just say, "To hell with Frank, I want to get rid of him anyway." I just don't want to. It's nonsense. She might come running to me, confess, beg for forgiveness, and tell a bunch of lies about how she didn't mean it and so on. If she did that, I'd probably pretend to forgive her, at least until the kids were old enough to leave home. I just don't know. It's impossible to predict what will happen. I don't know how long I would have stayed if I hadn't found out what Andy had planned for you. How did you even find out about them? I told her about the phone call I overheard and what I did when I heard it. She shook her head in disgust and said, "I wish I knew how long this had been going on. I have one record that says 6 years. I just want to know how long that two-faced bitch pretended to be my best friend while stabbing me in the back." She looked at her watch and said she had to get back to work. On the way out, she said she was going to hire a private investigator and would be in touch. And I said I would let her know if I found out anything. Over the next 3 weeks, nothing changed. Jean asked me to watch the kids while she went shopping on 2 weekends, and she wanted to pick them up both evenings. In those 3 weeks, we only did that twice when she wasn't with Andy, and both times only because I insisted. Both times I said she didn't really want to, and both times I said, "Looks like I'm going to have to go back to alpha male mode," and she gave in. At the end of that 3-week week, Pat called me. "I have everything I need to go after Andy. You were right. They've been seeing each other on the weekends, and although my private investigator didn't get any records from their motel room, he photographed them holding hands, hugging, and kissing, going in and out of motel rooms together. However, he did manage to get some good shots through your living room window. I'm going to see my lawyer this afternoon, and hopefully I'll have a subpoena from him in a couple of days. I'll call you and let you know when. When that happens, you're going to have some very interesting audio recordings." That conversation prompted me to take the next steps. That evening at dinner, I told Jean that we needed to review our finances. Due to the poor economic situation, the company is being forced to take some measures to survive. My salary has been cut by just over a third, so we're going to have to start saving and watching our spending. We'll have to cut back on some expenses. This morning, I talked to the bank about getting a loan on a second home to help us survive. I don't know how long this pay cut will last. It may be some time before it's over. That evening, for the first time since I found out about Andy, Jean didn't want to make love even though she had spent 3 hours with Andy that afternoon. 2 days passed and Pat called me. D-Day had arrived. I asked a friend to call Andy and arrange a meeting to discuss the sale of her house so that he could be there at 3 o'clock to receive the documents. Also at 3 o'clock, I would stop by your place to pay that whore a surprise visit. I would make her an offer she couldn't refuse. If she agreed, you could hold out a little longer. I called Alan, told him what was going on, and said I'd be late at the office and wanted him to pass on anything he found out after 3 calls. It was Thursday, and I could have waited until Friday, but I didn't want to wait. I could have watched Pat's visit live, but I wanted to hear the phone calls that would take place after Andy handed over the documents. At 3 o'clock, I sat down at the computer and watched Jean bustle around the house. The doorbell rang. She went to the door, opened it, and smiled when she saw Pat standing there. The smile disappeared when Pat hit her so hard that Jean jumped back and almost fell. Pat entered the house and shouted, "You're a useless, two-faced bitch. How can you pretend to be my best friend while having fun with my husband and not even try to deny it? I've had a private investigator following Andy for 2 weeks, and I recorded your Saturday visits to the motel, and all 6 times he was here. You really should close the curtains or blinds when you have guests in your living room. It prevents my detective from taking pictures. It goes without saying that you're dead to me, and when I leave here, I never want to hear your voice or see your face again. I have every right to expose you to public ridicule, but apparently I value your husband and children more than you do, so I'll give you one chance not to ruin your husband and children's lives. When you talk to that worthless piece of shit I'm married to, you better convince him not to fight for a divorce. If you don't convince him and he fights it, I'll make sure Frank gets copies of everything I have." She looked at Jean for a few seconds, then said, "I still can't believe you did this to me," and turned and walked away. Jean rushed to the window and watched Pat get into her car and drive out of the driveway. The pain was evident on her face as she realized she had just lost her best friend, and I couldn't help but wonder what she was thinking. Of course, she couldn't have known that she had lost Pat as her best friend when she started dating Andy after his divorce from Pat. If she was so upset about losing Pat's friendship, why did she start flirting with Andy in the first place? I turned off the live stream and went back to work. If I had kept watching, I would have only heard her side of all the phone calls she might have made. I'd just wait until I heard both sides. I didn't have to wait long. At 4:40, Alan called and said he had something interesting and would send it right away. 20 minutes later, I was listening to Jean and her lover. "Hello? It's me. We have a problem." "I know." "You know? Pat was here half an hour ago. She knows about us." "I know. I just got the divorce papers and a restraining order. I think you should get ready to meet Frank because I'm sure she's going to tell him everything. Maybe she won't. After she hit me, she said she wouldn't tell Frank if I ran away and didn't fight the divorce. How can I fight her? She has everything ready, photos and everything. I don't know. All I know is that she told me that if I ran away and didn't fight the divorce, she wouldn't tell Frank. I'm not going to fight it, especially since I know I can't win, so I think you're safe. Since Pat told you the truth, why would she lie? A woman who's been betrayed and all that, maybe to lull you into a false sense of security so that when Frank hits you with the whole truth, you'll be in shock. Either way, it'll change everything. How? Now we don't have to wait for her to get her trust fund. Now we have to focus on getting as much out of Frank as we can. That might not be so easy. According to Rob, we're in financial trouble. The economy is so bad that the company cut Frank's salary by 1/3, and he's negotiating with the bank to refinance his house to get by. What do we do? I don't know. I was counting on what I could get from Pat and what you could get from Frank to help us. I don't have a backup plan. I can barely get by on what I make at the agency. The economy has killed the real estate market. I think you'll have to live with Frank until the economy improves or I come up with something. I'll call you later. See you tomorrow? I don't know. Now that I don't have Pat's income to supplement mine, I'm going to have to work even harder to find properties to sell and sell the houses. I won't be able to take days off like I used to. We'll figure something out. Just give me some time to think it over. I smiled and turned off the CD. It was time for the next step. Alan had told me that he had met and befriended some rather shady characters in his line of work. By shady, I meant that some of them weren't exactly legal and didn't cross the line, but some were willing to do almost anything if the money was right. I called Alan and told him what I needed. He said it was possible and that he would call me back. 2 hours later, he called back and gave me a name and a phone number. 3 hours later, in the back room of a bar on the east side of town, the deal was done, and I walked out of there $2,000 poorer. I called Pat on her cell phone, let her know, and headed home. When I got home, knowing that Jean hadn't seen Andy that day, I insisted that we have some fun, and I got what I usually got on days when she wasn't entertaining her lover. Not tonight, Frank. I've had a really bad day. You know, Jean, lately I've gotten tired of hearing that from you every time I want to get down to business. Here's what I'm going to tell you. Keep it to yourself and let it grow. I don't care. I grabbed a pillow from the bed and headed to my home office to sleep on the leather couch. The next night, I returned to the bedroom, but the fun with Jean was over. She would have had to beg me before I would have taken her again. But I wasn't going to be without her. No, sir, I wasn't going to give up. The next morning on my way to work, I stopped and bought one of those alternative newspapers. You know the ones. I was going to make a list of escort services, check out a few of them, and see if I could work something out with someone. I was making the list when the phone rang. It was my father asking me to come up to his office. I went up to the fourth floor and entered his large corner office. Myrna, his secretary, waved me in. I was surprised to see my mother in the office. Are you ready to try your hand at running the company? Why? What's going on? Your mother and I have decided to go on a 3-week cruise, and depending on how things go, it could be 5 or 6 weeks or even longer. You've been in charge when I've taken a week off, but that was more routine work than management. This time, you'll be doing everything yourself, making all the decisions, putting out all the fires. Are you up for it? When do I start? We're leaving for Florida on Friday evening, so when I leave work on Friday, it'll be all yours. Okay. While you're both here, I need to fill you in on what's going on. I told them about the situation with Jean and that I had lied to her about the pay cut and the possibility of further cuts. When she's around one of you, I want you to back me up on how the economic crisis is affecting the company. But the company is doing fine. I know, but I'm trying to make her think she won't lose much in the divorce. The divorce will cost me my children, and I don't want that. I'm going to try to keep the family together until the kids are old enough to choose which parent they want to live with, or until they're old enough to live on their own. We'll help in any way we can, my father said. I can't believe Jean agreed to this, my mother said. I always thought so highly of her. Who will run your department while you're running the company? I think I'll give Katie a chance. Do you think that's wise? She doesn't have much experience. Well, to hell with her. I told you you're in charge, so I'm not going to interfere. When I returned to my office, Katie followed me. She pointed to the center of my desk and asked, "What's this?" She pointed to the page of the newspaper with the escort agency ad and my list lying next to it. She dumped you, and you're looking for a replacement? That's half right. I dumped her. She didn't dump me. Why are you looking for a professional to replace her? I have needs, and I'm not the type to hang out in bars looking for one-night stands. The solution to your problem is much closer. Oh? And what might that be? I'm sure you can guess. I figured it out in less than a microsecond. It took me a little longer to get up and lock the door. By the time I closed the door, Katie was lying on her back on my desk. When we straightened up, I asked why. I've been obsessed with you since the day I started working for you. I wanted you so badly I could scream, but you were happily married and I don't break up families. And so this unrequited love continued until the day I saw the DVD you were watching. Since then, I've just been waiting for my chance, waiting for an opportunity to express my desires, and today, that paper on your desk gave me that chance. Maybe you should put a couch in your office since your desk isn't very comfortable. Are you saying this isn't just a one-time thing? I really hope not. Do you see yourself as the next Mrs. Englewood? No, at least not yet. I think we're very well suited, but outside of work and our relationship here, I don't know anything about you or myself. Judging by what happened, I'd say we're sexually compatible. But there's something more to our relationship. I wonder if there's something more to it. Don't get your hopes up. It might take me a while to get over the first Mrs. Englewood. About 10 years. Right now, I plan to stay married to that bitch until my kids are grown. I don't want to lose them because of a divorce. 10 years? That should be enough time to figure out if we're right for each other. When can we do it again? I don't think we should make this a habit at work, and I have a few things to take care of before we can do it anywhere else. Besides, you might be too busy for us to see each other again anytime soon. Why? Because this Friday at 4 o'clock, you're taking over this department. And I went on to explain what would happen. Do you really think I can handle it? I wouldn't give you a chance if I wasn't sure you could do it. If you do as well as I think you will, you'll get a permanent job when my father finally decides to retire and I move on to a higher position. Damn, I didn't expect that. Won't that upset those who think they should have gotten the job? Maybe, but so what? They may think they should have gotten the job because of their seniority or for some other reason, but the fact is there's no one else in the department who can do the job. If you have any concerns, speak up and I'll support you. She paused for a few seconds, then said, You've never been to my apartment. Would you like to come in and see my prints? You have prints? She just smiled, and I said, Let's see them tomorrow. Maybe we can leave work early so I have more time to look at them. Sure, boss. When I got home, Jen had already made dinner, but we hardly spoke. Most of the conversation at the table was with the kids, who told me about their day at school. After dinner, I helped Marianne with her homework, then spent some time in the basement workshop working with Jamie on the model aircraft carrier he was building. After the children went to bed, I spent an hour in my home office reviewing several contracts I had brought home to look over. When I came in, Jean was already in bed, and I turned my back to her, covering myself with the blanket. That must have caught her attention because even on nights when we didn't have sex, I always hugged her. I knew she wouldn't make a move because Andy hadn't stopped by that day. If everything went according to plan, it would be a long time before she tried to initiate sex, especially if she needed Andy to entertain her for that. As for me, I never intended to make a move. The next day, Katie and I left work an hour early and went to her place. She had lied to me. She didn't have the prints, but she had time to show me something, and that kept me there until 8 o'clock. And then I had to go home. I called Jean and told her I'd be late and not to wait up for me. When I got home, I played with the kids until it was time for them to go to bed, then watched TV for about an hour before going to bed myself. Everything was the same as the night before. No hugs. And although I hadn't watched TV at home that day, it was obvious that Andy hadn't been there, as Jean made no attempt to initiate anything. The next morning at 10 past 10, Pat called. Thanks, Frank, I feel better now. Sure, I have no idea what you're talking about, but you can always come over. Call me. Maybe we can have dinner sometime. I'd love to. I'll be in touch. Half an hour later, Alan called and simply said, It's all sorted out. I know. His wife just called me. She must have gotten a call from the hospital. I'd like to ask, but I think I'll wait until I hear about it from the usual sources. I don't want to seem like I know too much too soon. Nonsense. It could take weeks. It looks like he was mugged and decided to fight back. Bad move on his part. 2 broken knees, a broken elbow, a broken nose, and a couple of knocked out teeth. And from what I hear, the guy who mugged him hit him so hard in the groin that he'll probably lose at least 1 testicle. My God, that's too bad. Yeah, sure. When I got home that evening, at dinner, I said, I talked to Pat today. Jean's face turned pale and I continued. I stopped by Milford to talk to the purchasing agent, and while I was there, I invited Pat to dinner. I also asked her if she and Andy would like to come over for a barbecue on Sunday. Why didn't you tell me she kicked him out? She paused, then said, I thought I told you. I must have been busy and missed it. I can't believe it. Why would Andy cheat on a woman like Pat? She's smart, witty, and beautiful. I'd be interested to know what he sees in her. Anyway, I invited her over to cheer her up, but she turned me down. That's strange. At least I don't remember her ever turning down our invitations before. She must be very unhappy to have done so. She didn't give you any clues as to who the other woman is? No. She was too upset to talk about it. Well, sooner or later, everything will come out. After dinner, I played Monopoly with the kids until it was time for them to go to bed, then read for a while before going to bed myself. I was already lying down when Jean joined me and snuggled up against me. I rolled over onto my side and turned my back to her, muttering, Good night. In the morning, I told Jean that Eldridge from TPM would be in town for contract negotiations and that I would probably invite him to lunch so he wouldn't look for me late. Eldridge wasn't there, of course, so I invited Kathy to lunch. Then we had dessert, lots of dessert, at her apartment. It was Friday. I met Alan for lunch, and he gave me a CD. There's not much on it. A dozen calls from her home and cell phones to this jerk's number. She wanted to know when he was coming, and he kept putting her off. She hadn't been able to reach him for the last 2 days, and we know why, of course. She called the real estate agency half a dozen times and was told he wasn't home. She tried calling his cell, but of course he didn't answer. Now she knows why. I told her at breakfast that I heard he was in the hospital and badly injured. I told her that Pat must have gotten to the husband of the woman Andy was having an affair with, and he started going after Andy. I think that's mostly true. He smiled and said, "The husband is behind this." We both laughed, and Alan asked, "So, what now?" "That's up to Jean. I'm not going to tell her what I know. I'll live with that bitch until the kids are 18, and then I'll kick her out. Of course, she may have other plans. She was so unhappy with me that she had an affair with Andy, so she may just break up with him. If she does, I'll threaten to show everyone the audio and video recordings we've collected if she doesn't agree to my divorce terms. I have no idea how it will all turn out. All we can do is wait and see. I can only wish you luck, buddy. Should I take the equipment?" "No, leave it as it is. I still want to know what she's up to. Just let me know if anything interesting comes up, and if not, we'll wait until Friday afternoon." I spent the day with my father to keep him in the loop and discuss some things I needed to know when I took over. At 5 o'clock, he stood up and said, "Everything is at your disposal, Frank. I'll see you when your mother decides she's had enough, and I want to warn you that may not happen." He left, and I called my old office and asked Katie to come in. Myrna had gone home at 5, so Katie's arrival wouldn't cause any gossip, and there was no reason for it. After all, I was the boss, and Katie was one of the managers in my department. It made sense to call those who reported to me into my office. Katie came in and asked, "Did you call the boss?" "Yes. Something's missing in this room, and I thought a woman's perspective might help me figure out what it is. I think I already know, but I need a second opinion. A woman's opinion." She looked around and said, "The walls should be a lighter color." "That's it? That's all you can come up with?" She shrugged, and I said, "I'm disappointed in you, Katie. The first thought that should have come to your mind was, I would never lie down on that desk." She smiled and started unbuttoning her blouse. When I got home, Jean looked upset, and I thought it was because her lover was in the hospital and in pretty bad shape. She was probably thinking, if Pat could do that to Andy, what will she do to me? She said she wouldn't tell Frank, but she didn't say she wouldn't get back at me. I pretended not to notice. After dinner, I played with the kids, and we agreed to go to the amusement park the next day. When I got up, Jean was already in bed, and when I climbed in next to her, neither of us made any attempt to cuddle. The next day, Jean begged me not to go to the amusement park with her, saying she wasn't feeling well. The kids and I had a great time at the park, but when we got home, Jean was gone. She showed up about an hour later with a couple of pizzas she had bought on her way home. "I just didn't feel like cooking tonight. I'm not feeling very well, so I'm going to bed." The next 5 days flew by, and Jean and I practically lived in the same house. Neither of us tried to talk to the other except to ask, "What do you want for dinner?" And, "Don't forget to take out the trash." On Friday, when we were having dinner with Alan, he passed me a CD across the table. Nothing special. On Saturday, she visited him in the hospital. I don't have a video recording, but on the audio recording from her purse, you can hear her crying as she leaves. They mostly talked about how they couldn't imagine how angry Andy's wife must be, and wondered where she found the people who had inflicted such injuries on him. The good news, at least I think you'll consider it good news, is that he told her that if she didn't divorce you and get a large sum of money, they wouldn't be able to carry out their plans. Andy doesn't seem to have his own health insurance. He was covered by his wife's policy through her work, but she took him off the policy when she filed for divorce. He's paying his own medical bills, which are significant and growing every day. There's a video of her sitting at home crying, but other than that, there's nothing else. It seems like they're out of luck because she won't get a lump sum from me. What's more, tonight I'm going to tell her that the family budget will have to be cut by a third, or she can give up the car. The choice is hers, but she has to choose one or the other. I've already told her that because of the poor economic situation, my salary has been cut by a third and that there will be further cuts. And how long are you going to live like this? That depends on Jean. She could leave at any moment, and there's nothing I can do about it. The no-fault divorce laws in this state don't give me any leeway. But if Jean doesn't leave, I intend to stick it out until the kids are old enough to live on their own or old enough to choose which parent they want to live with if we do get divorced. Well, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Good luck, buddy. When I got home, I asked Jean if she had talked to Pat, and she said no. That's strange. I don't remember the two of you not talking for even a day. She must be very upset about what Andy did to her. I'll call her and invite her over so we can cheer her up. I don't think you should do that. I think it's better to leave her alone right now, and don't forget that I know her much better than you do. Okay, if you say so. We have enough problems of our own. We're going to have to cut our family budget by a third until things settle down at work. I don't know how we're going to do that. Well, it's your choice, but either cut back on family expenses or give up the car. Payments, license plates, and insurance make up about a third of the family budget. It's up to you. That's not fair. I need a car. Then cut back on your budget. We'll end up earning a third less than before and we'll have to live with it. I don't understand. Damn it, Jian, it has to be done. Accept the fact that we won't have a good life anymore. Just do it. Stop arguing and pray that things don't get worse. There's still a chance the company will go under, and then we'll really be in deep shit. I left her sitting there and went down to the basement to work on a few things. An hour later, I came back upstairs and asked what was for dinner. I was hoping we could go out somewhere tonight. God, woman, are you out of your mind? I just told you we're having financial problems and we need to cut back on expenses. Remember those words, Jean. Budget, budget, budget. She ran out of the room in tears and I smiled and started making dinner. When everything was ready, I called the kids to come play. And while we ate, we talked about their day at school. They asked where their mom was, and I told them she wasn't feeling well. Something's wrong with her, and she's resting in her bedroom. After dinner, I played with the kids until they went to bed, and then I went to the bedroom. When I walked into the room, Jean was awake. She looked at me and said, "You shouldn't have talked to me like that." No, I shouldn't have. That dinner showed me that you don't take me seriously when I say that we have less money now, and we have to adjust accordingly. And that goes for both the household budget and your car. Make a decision by Sunday evening and let me know, or I'll make the decision myself on Monday. I got under the covers, turned my back to her, and fell asleep with a smile on my face. I had no doubt that she would choose the budget over the car, but I had a little hope that she wouldn't say anything to me until Sunday evening. And on Monday, I would get rid of her car. She was silent at breakfast, so only the children and I talked at the table. I asked them what they wanted to do that day, and when they didn't answer, I said, "How about going to the park?" Thinking I meant an amusement park, Jean said, "I thought we had to stick to the budget." This gave me an opportunity to strike another blow. The park is free, Jean. You don't have to pay to go on the swings, slides, or playground equipment. I spent the day at the park with the kids, and then we came home and I worked in the yard until dinner. Dinner went without incident. The kids were tired and Jean seemed to have nothing to say. After dinner, I watched some TV until I felt it was time to go to bed. Jean was already in bed, either asleep or pretending to be asleep, which was fine with me. On Sunday morning, I said I needed to go to the office and look through some books to find a way to cut costs and remain competitive. An hour later, I was buried in Katie's work and she was begging me to do everything I could, which I did, of course. That evening, Jean gave me the answer I had been waiting for. She would give up her car and try to cut back on expenses. She was calm toward me, and I guessed that she wasn't thrilled that I had called her dead, and I accepted that. As long as she was calm toward me, she wouldn't try to do it, and I wouldn't have to come up with excuses for why I couldn't or wouldn't do it. On Monday morning, I went to the bank and opened a new account in my name only. We were paid by direct deposit, so I transferred the check from our joint account to my new one, and then arranged for 2/3 of the check to be automatically transferred to the joint account that Jean and I shared. In the afternoon, Katie and I went to a meeting at the Hilton Hotel with representatives from Matheson Manufacturing. And after the meeting, we went upstairs and spent a very pleasant hour together before returning to work. Before I left work, Alan called me. "I need to tell you something. Can you stop by on your way home?" "I'm already on my way. See you at 10. When I arrived at his shop, he led me into his office and asked me to sit down. Everything I have is from her purse. She came to see him on Saturday and yesterday, but their conversations were mostly about him pressuring her for money and her saying she couldn't give him any because your pay was cut and you'd limited her spending. Today, she met with him again, and the conversation took a different turn. You won't believe it. He pressed a few buttons on the desk, and from the speakers on the sofa behind him, I heard, "We have another option. How much is his life insurance worth?" "About $1 million. He has a $500,000 policy that he pays for himself, and another $500,000 policy from work. And each of them is double indemnity?" "I think so." "So in the event of an accident, you'll get $2 million? I think so. So we need him to get into a fatal accident. And how are we going to do that? We need to think about it a little, but I'm sure if we both put our heads together, we'll come up with something. I don't even know where to start. Think about it, and something will come to mind. Maybe nothing viable, but maybe your idea will give me a clue, or what you're thinking will coincide with what I'm thinking. Alan turned off the recording and said, I'll give you a copy so you can listen to the whole conversation later, but thought you should hear this part right now. I sat in silence for a while, then said, that changes everything. The Russians had something the KGB called wet work, and now I would very much like to know someone who could do that kind of thing. Alan looked at me for a few seconds, then picked up a pen, wrote something on a piece of paper, and handed it to me. Across the table, I read it and looked at him in surprise while he stared at me expressionlessly. The notepad read, 20,000 each. I reached out, took the pen, crossed out the word each, and wrote Andy. Then I handed the notepad back to him and said, go. He smiled and said, consider it done. When I got home that evening, I found it difficult to act normal around Jean. At dinner, the kids and I mostly talked about our day. After dinner, I helped them with their homework. Then we watched their favorite DVD, The Lion King. And when it was over, it was time for them to go to bed. Jean was lying in bed waiting for me. There was a time when just the sight of her made me throw off my clothes and rush to her with excitement, but I just looked at her, got into bed, and climbed under the covers. I turned on my side away from her and closed my eyes. After about 5 minutes, she got out of bed, and a couple of minutes later, she came back, crawled under the covers, and we fell asleep. I didn't sleep very well and got up early. I managed to get dressed and leave before Jean woke up. I had a breakfast at IHOP and then went to the office. Around 10, I called Pat and suggested we meet for lunch. Over a taco salad, I told her I was going to tell Jean what I knew about her and Andy. I know you don't need her anymore, but I thought I should tell you. You're right, I don't care. But what about your kids? I think I can leave them. Jean loves her lifestyle too much to give it up, especially since Andy can't help her. She could stay and be a mother, but that would mean separate bedrooms and pretending to be a faithful and loving wife in public. I think she'll agree to that. I have a trump card I can play if she doesn't. Oh? What's that? All the video and audio recordings I have of her and Andy. She'll play by my rules, or the whole world will find out what a slut she really is. How's your divorce going? He's not fighting it, so the divorce should be finalized in about 3 months. I wished her luck and went back to work. I called Jean and told her I'd be late for dinner and not to wait up for me. After work, I invited Katie out to dinner, and we ended up going back to her place for dessert. I got home at midnight and Jean was already asleep. I got up again and left the house before Jean woke up. When I got home that evening, Jean was in tears, and I found out why the next morning when Alan called me. I just wanted to let you know that yesterday afternoon I found out about the death of your wife's friend's husband. I was told that someone, probably one of the nurses, didn't release the air from the needle when changing the IV. An air bubble got into his heart and it just stopped beating. Some people just have bad luck. You might want to tell your wife so she can call her friend for support? I will. Thanks for letting me know. When I got home that evening, Jean was in a very bad mood. I was half an hour later than usual, and when I walked in, she said, couldn't you have called to let me know you were going to be late? The tone of her voice was such that I knew what was coming. Don't take your anger out on me. I've had enough of you. After the kids go to bed, we'll sit down and talk to clear some things up. I walked away from her to wash the dishes, leaving her standing there with a stunned look on her face. 10 minutes after I put the kids to bed, I told her to come see me in the living room. When I walked in, she was sitting on the leather couch and I sat down at the table. First of all, I know why you and Pat aren't talking, and I know who Andy has been seeing. I saw surprise and then anger flash across her face, and I knew I had understood correctly. Pat didn't tell on you. She said she wouldn't tell me if you convinced Andy not to fight the divorce. She didn't tell me. I told her myself. And with that, I pressed play on the VCR, and Jean saw for the first time what I had been collecting. I let her watch for the few minutes, then fast-forwarded to the part where they talked about Pat's trust fund. After I saw that, I told Pat about you and Andy and showed her this tape. Why I sat there and did nothing is none of your business. All that matters is that I've decided to take action. You have 3 options, and only 3. The first is that you pack your things and leave, and I file for divorce. You get nothing, and I get custody of the children. The second is that you stay here, be a mother to the children and a housekeeper for me. You move all your things into the guest bedroom. We'll still look like a loving couple in front of our friends and family, but I repeat, there will be no sexual relationship between us. The third option is you say, go to hell, Frank, I'm taking the kids and I'll fight for whatever I can get from you. If you choose this option, I'll take this recording to the police. And I pressed play again so she could hear herself discussing my imminent accidental death with her lover. That's called conspiracy to commit murder. And in this state, you're looking at up to 25 years in prison. While you're in prison, I'll divorce you, get custody of the children, and they'll grow up and leave home before you ever see them again. The choice is yours, and I want to hear your answer before I leave for work in the morning. One last thing. Tomorrow, you're going to the hospital, and you're going to tell Andy that when he gets out, he'd better get on the first plane, train, or bus out of town because I'm coming for him. If you love him as much as you say you do, maybe the first or second option will work for you, because the third option will land him in a prison cell next to you. I can't. You can't what? Tell him. He died in the hospital. When? Late last night? Damn it. I was so hoping he'd come back to the hospital when he was discharged. You know what upset me the most? Not you, damn Andy, although he pissed me off too, but the fact that when he suggested killing me, you didn't say, we can't do that, or I'm not going to participate in something like that. You just agreed. Get out of here and move into the guest room. And don't forget that I want an answer before I leave for work in the morning. She got up and left, and I took the disc out of the player, put it in my briefcase, and took it upstairs to my bedroom. I moved the dresser to block the door so no one could come in on me in the middle of the night while I was asleep, then got into bed and fell fast asleep. In the morning, I found Jean sitting in the kitchen with red eyes. I poured myself a cup of coffee and asked, how did it go? What? What was your answer? You already know and don't pretend you don't. I can't leave my children and I don't want to go to prison. Okay, we'll discuss the details when I get home tonight. Don't be late with dinner. I'll be working late. Remember one thing. You should know that I'm watching you. At the first sign, even the slightest, that you're going to take the kids and run, I'll bring the full force of the law down on you. Understood? Yes. I had a great day at work, and of course, staying late at work was a euphemism for spending time at Katie's apartment. I got home around 9 and found Jean watching TV. I just looked at her, said kitchen, went to my room, and put my briefcase on the desk. When I walked into the kitchen, Jean was sitting at the table. I sat down across from her and said, the rules are simple. You will continue to be the mother you've always been. You will keep the house in order, as you always have, and behave normally when I'm around the kids. When we leave the house or meet with friends and relatives, you will play the role of an attentive and loving wife. The excuse for our separate bedrooms will be that I snore so loudly that you can't sleep. As for your personal life, I leave that up to you, but you will never bring another man into this house. Whatever you do, you must make sure that it does not become public knowledge and lead to my humiliation. This should not be a problem for you as you have enough experience. You managed to hide it from me and Pat for over 6 years. Follow these rules, and nothing will change for you. You will still have your credit cards, access to your bank account, and your car. The only change is that you will no longer have a loving husband, but that doesn't matter because you don't need him anyway. Any questions? Just one. How long? Until the children turn 18 or become independent. And then? Who knows? That's 10 years from now. And a lot can change in that time. You can also take the first option at any time. I'll even sweeten the deal a little. I'll give you $5,000 for each year. And if you stick it out for at least 5 years, I'll buy you a new car. That was 7 years ago, and everything has worked out perfectly. To everyone else, Jean is a devoted wife and mother. She's had a few boyfriends, but she's kept them out of the spotlight, and I doubt any of our friends or relatives know about it. Except my parents, of course. I told them about her affair with Andy and our current relationship, but I never told them how I persuaded her to agree to it. Her current boyfriend is so serious that he hired a private investigator on me, but I don't know how serious she is about him, and I don't intend to ask. My father announced that he is retiring next year and handing the company over to me. When that happens, I will be able to make some changes. Maybe I will fire Jean and allow her to come to the house. Another option I like is a 5-acre house with a guest house and a 4-car garage. I could buy it, quietly divorce Jean, and let her live in the guest house so she could be closer to the kids. I think Katie would like that. She hasn't said anything yet, but I know she wants a more serious relationship, and so do I. Well, we'll see in a year. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for new videos.